Halloween just doesn't feel the same when you're an adult. At 32, I still enjoy the decorations, but mostly I just hand out candy and watch horror movies. That year, in 2022, I had spent the morning tidying up my house, picking up candy from the store, and getting ready for the trick-or-treaters. Our neighborhood was never the busiest, but we always got a few groups of kids every year. Around 3 p.m., I left my front door slightly ajar so I could hear if anyone approached while I watched a movie. Hours passed, and not a single knock came. The eerie silence outside was unsettling. Usually, by 5 p.m., there were at least a few kids running around. I looked out the window, but the street was empty, unusually quiet for Halloween night. I figured maybe traditions were fading, but I still kept my bowl of candy ready just in case. It wasn't until nearly 6:30 that I heard my doorbell ring. I grabbed the candy bowl and made my way over, but as I approached, I noticed someone peering inside. It was a lone figure wearing a black hooded cloak and a featureless silver mask. The mask had hollow eye holes, giving off a strange, lifeless expression. I hesitated before stepping closer. Something felt off. I opened the door just enough to extend the candy bowl and told them to take a handful. As they reached in, I realized they were alone. No parents, no friends, just this single person in an unsettling costume. They were tall, taller than most kids, and when I glanced at their eyes through the mask, I noticed something strange. Their eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot, with deep, dark circles beneath them. My instincts told me this wasn't a child, but I didn't want to make things awkward. Maybe it was just an older teen wanting to enjoy Halloween. They took a few pieces of candy, gave me one last lingering stare, then turned and walked away without saying a word. I shut the door, shaking off the strange encounter, and went back to my movie. 15 minutes later, a soft sound reached my ears, a faint, deliberate footstep right outside my front door. I expected another trick-or-treater, so I got up again, but as I turned, my breath caught in my throat. The same figure from earlier was now inside my house. He stood just a few feet from the doorway, still wearing the silver mask, still silent. My pulse pounded in my ears as I struggled to process how he had gotten inside. Had I forgotten to shut the door completely? Trying to stay calm, I forced out a shaky, "Can I help you?" The masked figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, breathing heavily. The silence stretched unbearably until, without a word, he slowly backed out of the house and disappeared into the night. I stood frozen, my heart racing, before running to the door and slamming it shut, locking it tight. Peeking through the window, I saw him walking down my driveway, glancing over his shoulder as if checking if I was still watching. Something about this wasn't just strange, it was wrong. This wasn't a prank or a misunderstanding. There was an unsettling intent behind his actions. I grabbed my phone and started dialing the police, but before I could finish, another sound made me stop. A knock. Not the doorbell. Not hurried knocking like someone excited for candy. Just a slow, deliberate tap on the wood. I crept up to the peephole and looked out. A different man stood there. He wasn't in a costume. He looked about mid-40s, wearing a dark green sweater and jeans, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Then he spoke. "Hey, I'm looking for my son. He was trick-or-treating but never came home. Have you seen him?" Something about his voice made my stomach twist. It was eerily calm, but forced, like he was rehearsing. He glanced around before leaning in slightly, and that's when I saw it, his eyes. They were bloodshot, hollow-looking, just like the person in the mask. A cold realization hit me. This wasn't a coincidence. I backed away and continued my call with the police, whispering into the phone while keeping my eyes locked on the front door. A few minutes later, I peeked again. The man was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the property. In the bushes by my house, they found something that made my skin crawl: a crumpled black cloak and a silver mask, discarded in a hurry. The masked figure and the man at my door were the same person. They never found him that night, and I never figured out what he truly intended. But I knew one thing: he had planned something far worse than just trick-or-treating. Story 2. It was Halloween night, and I was in 8th grade at the time. My friends and I had reached that awkward stage where trick-or-treating felt a little too childish, but we still wanted to do something to make the night exciting. Most of the group decided to stay home, maybe pass out candy or just watch movies, but my best friend Tyler and I weren't ready to let the night go to waste. We needed something thrilling, something to make Halloween feel special again. That's when Tyler mentioned a place he heard about, a supposedly abandoned tunnel or mine hidden deep in the woods a few miles south of town. I had heard rumors about it before, but no one I knew had actually been there. Tyler got some directions from a friend, and with our plan set, we grabbed our bikes and rode off. As we pedaled through town, the streets were still alive with costumed kids running from house to house, parents trailing behind them. But as we got closer to the woods, the houses became sparse, the decorations disappeared, and the laughter faded into silence. There were no more streetlights, just the glow of the moon peeking through the branches. We locked our bikes to a tree near the entrance of a barely visible footpath, exactly where Tyler's friend said it would be. It wasn't an actual trail, just a narrow, overgrown path created by the footsteps of those who had come before us. The ground was damp and uneven, making it easy to lose our footing. A few times we had to stop, backtrack, and search for the right way forward. We only had one flashlight between us, so Tyler led the way while I followed closely behind. It took nearly 40 minutes of trudging through the dense woods before we finally reached a small clearing. And there it was, the entrance to the tunnel, a jagged hole carved into the side of a hill, completely swallowed by darkness. Standing in front of it, I felt a strange chill creep down my spine. The air smelled damp and stale, and when Tyler shined his light inside, we saw nothing but an endless stretch of rock walls disappearing into the blackness. It had to be an old mine. As Tyler took a step closer, I instinctively glanced back at the woods behind us. For just a split second, I could have sworn I saw something move between the trees, a shadow shifting unnaturally in the darkness. My breath hitched. "Tyler," I whispered, "point the light over there." He swung the flashlight around, scanning the trees, but nothing, just stillness. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just psyching myself out. Either way, I felt a creeping unease settle in the pit of my stomach. Shaking it off, we turned our attention back to the tunnel and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, particles floating through the beam of light as we walked forward. Our footsteps echoed against the stone walls, making it impossible to tell if we were truly alone. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. We had only ventured a little way in when we heard it. A voice. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but the tunnel carried the sound just enough for us to hear. Tyler froze, his grip tightening on the flashlight as he directed the beam further into the mine. But there was nothing, just an endless void of darkness. Then, another whisper, closer this time. Without a word, Tyler and I turned on our heels and started walking, fast, back toward the entrance. But as we moved, the whispers grew louder. They weren't whispers anymore. It almost sounded like murmuring, low voices speaking words we couldn't understand. The faster we walked, the louder they became. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but all I could see was blackness. The voices were following us. Finally, the entrance came into view. Relief flooded through me until Tyler suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. A man stood just outside the tunnel, only about 10 yards away. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring straight at us. Every hair on my body stood on end. My blood turned ice cold. He wasn't wearing a costume. He wasn't another kid looking for a Halloween thrill. He was a grown man, alone, deep in the woods, standing at the only exit of a tunnel we never should have entered. Panic surged through me. Tyler and I bolted, sprinting past the man and straight into the trees. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to know if he was chasing us. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I didn't stop running until the woods thinned out and the distant glow of streetlights came into view. Only then did we finally slow down, gasping for breath. As we stumbled back into town, we tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was the man waiting for us? Did he follow us into the woods, knowing we'd go inside? And what about the voices in the tunnel? Were there other people in there, or was it something else entirely? All I know is that we got lucky. If we had stayed in that tunnel even a few seconds longer, that man could have reached the entrance and trapped us inside. Maybe that was his plan all along. Or maybe he was just as much a mystery as the tunnel itself. Either way, we never went back, and I never will. Story 3. It was late October, my sophomore year at university, and I shared my dorm with a girl named Kylie. She was outgoing and always surrounded by friends, while I was more of a homebody, content with my own company. We got along well enough, but weren't particularly close. As Halloween weekend approached, Kylie urged me to come to a party at her friend's house. She was convinced I'd have fun, make some new friends, and enjoy a change of scenery from the cramped dorms. At first, I wasn't interested, but after relentless persuading, I caved and agreed to go. Not wanting to spend too much on a costume, I picked up a last-minute ghost outfit from Spirit Halloween that looked like it had been through a washing machine one too many times. By 8 p.m., Kylie had ordered an Uber to take us to her friend's place. The ride was short, only about 10 minutes from campus, but the location felt isolated, as if we had left town entirely. The house stood alone on a long, empty road, its yard filled with glowing orange lights and inflatable Halloween decorations swaying in the breeze. Inside, the atmosphere was more intimate than I expected. Instead of the packed chaos I had envisioned, there were only about 15 people, all seemingly around my age. The night turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. I played a few games, had some drinks, and actually felt glad I had come. But as the hours passed and my social battery drained, I found myself ready to leave. By 1 a.m., I sought out Kylie and asked if she was ready to go, but she was too drunk to care and decided she'd crash there for the night. That left me to figure out my own way home. I wasn't close enough to anyone else at the party to ask for a ride, especially since most were drunk and the majority were guys. So, I stepped outside, trying to think of an alternative. Opening the Uber app, I groaned at the $30 fare. For a 10-minute ride, I barely had that much in my account. Buzzed and thinking less clearly than I should have, I figured a 35 to 40-minute walk wouldn't be so bad. I told myself I'd be back on campus before I knew it. The moment I stepped away from the glow of the house, the reality of my decision hit me. The road was almost pitch black, with sparse streetlights placed at irregular intervals. I'd walk through brief moments of light before plunging back into long stretches of darkness. The quiet was unsettling, with only the sound of my footsteps crunching against the pavement to keep me company. Not long into my walk, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road behind me. I was sure I hadn't passed it earlier. Every so often, when I glanced back, it seemed to have moved slightly closer. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, but the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. Then, suddenly, I lost sight of the car altogether. The road was straight, with nowhere for it to turn, yet it had seemingly vanished into the fog. Trying to shake the unease creeping on my spine, I quickened my pace. Minutes passed, and just as I began to calm down, the distant rumble of an engine reached my ears. A car approached from behind, its headlights off. My heart pounded as it slowed to match my pace before coming to a stop beside me. The driver, a man with a patchy beard and unsettling smile, leaned toward his open window. "Where are you heading?" "Pretty late to be walking out here alone." His voice carried something strange in it, something that sent every alarm in my body ringing. I forced a polite smile and said I was fine before picking up my pace. But he didn't drive off. Instead, he inched forward, staying right alongside me. "I can give you a lift," he offered, his voice more insistent now. "It's not safe out here." His tone had shifted. The friendly pretense was gone. My hands trembled as I refused again, keeping my eyes forward. I could feel him staring at me, his gaze drilling into the side of my face. The sound of his car stopping made my stomach drop. Before I could react, his door creaked open. I turned my head just in time to see him stepping out. Fast, determined. Panic surged through me, my legs freezing for a split second before instinct kicked in. But before I could run, a pair of headlights pierced through the fog ahead. Another car was approaching. Without thinking, I sprinted into the middle of the road, frantically waving my arms. The man hesitated, then immediately got back into his car. As the other vehicle slowed, he sped off into the darkness. The driver who stopped turned out to be one of the guys from the party. I only vaguely recognized his face, but I didn't care. I jumped into his car and, voice shaking, told him what had happened. He drove me back to campus, and I don't think I had ever felt so relieved in my life. I sobered up instantly the moment that man stepped out of his car, and I know, without a doubt, that if no one had come down that road at that exact moment, I wouldn't be here to tell the story.